a soldier who took his own life inside the Argentine president's home, grooming cases that ended in the worst possible way, and crimes so vile you'll wish you'd never heard about them. Argentina's dark side of the internet is really dark, straight up sinister. This was an incredibly hard video to make, so let's not waste time. Let's get into it right now. It's 5 in the morning on December 16th, 2025, at the Olivos presidential residence, one of the most heavily guarded official homes in Argentina. A soldier is on duty. His name is Rodrigo. He's 21 years old. He's from the province of Misiones, in the northeast of the country. He's a grenadier. And that morning, at his post, Rodrigo takes his own life with his service rifle. Officially, it was a suicide, but there was more to it. A lot more. Because what investigators uncovered afterward is, honestly, one of the most disturbing things you're going to hear in a long time. Rodrigo didn't end up there on his own. He was pushed there, step by step, through messages, phone calls, and very carefully crafted lies. Rodrigo Andres Gomez was a voluntary soldier in the army. He was part of the Chacabuco squadron of the Grenadiers on Horseback Regiment, basically the elite unit responsible for guarding the presidential residence. Being a grenadier isn't something just anyone gets to do. It takes dedication, discipline, and a real sense of commitment. He was a young guy from a small province who had chosen to serve his country. His family talked about him with pride. And like any 21-year-old, he used his phone, downloaded apps. At some point, he wanted to connect with someone. That's all they needed to destroy him. It all starts with a dating app called Evermatch. Rodrigo signs up like anyone would. No red flags, no reason to think twice. A profile catches his eye. The name was Julieta Achelen Cardozo. Photos, a bio, everything. Just a regular girl, or so it seemed. Rodrigo starts messaging her. Things progress, back and forth. Nothing weird, nothing out of the ordinary. What Rodrigo didn't know was that there was no Julieta on the other side of that screen. There was an inmate, or several, operating from a cell inside the Magdalena prison in Buenos Aires, with a phone that, by all accounts, had no business being there. This was the first step in a trap they had already rehearsed, a trap they had set dozens, maybe hundreds of times before. Once the relationship had gone far enough, the real play began. Out of nowhere, Rodrigo gets a voice message, a woman, hysterical, furious. Investigators have a name for this moment, the terror audio. It's the point where the victim completely panics, and right then, right at that exact moment, the next character shows up. A cop. Well, someone claiming to be a cop. He introduced himself as an officer with the Buenos Aires City Police. He said he'd been informed about the complaint, that there was an open investigation, that Rodrigo was in serious trouble.
Buenos días, señor Gómez Rodrigo. Me presento, acá te habla Matías Nahuelconti, subteniente a cargo del Servicio de Investigaciones contra la Pedofilia Infantil Cibernética y Trata de Personas. Mirá, Gómez, en la oficina de enfrente tengo la madre de una menor de edad radicándome una denuncia en tu contra. Si me tomo la molestia de mandarte este audio porque te encuentro bastante complicado en la causa que se te está imputando. Tengo el dispositivo de la menor conectado a una PC, por lo cual se pudo haber recuperado todo tipo de fotos, archivos y conversaciones borradas de tu parte, lo cual te comprometen un montón. Te pido que te hagas una ventana horaria y te comuniques conmigo. Si no, de lo contrario, vamos a terminar de escribir la causa y mandarla directamente a la fiscalía que se encuentra de turno.
And then came the line that seals the trap, the one that genuinely turns your stomach when you hear it. The guy told him, word for word, "Your freedom is at stake and it's in my hands. Tell me how much you have right now in a digital wallet so we can make a transfer. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours." He wasn't a cop. He was Tomás Francavilla, an inmate at Magdalena, convicted of robbery, running his operation from his cell. Rodrigo paid. Of course he paid. By that point, with the psychological game in full swing, when someone tells you your freedom is on the line, that there's an investigation with your name on it, that you're a suspect in something that could ruin your entire life, you pay. He made several transfers to digital wallets. Think of these like Venmo or Cash App accounts, except they were registered under other people's names, women who acted as the operation's collectors. The total came out to around $1,000. For a 21-year-old volunteer soldier, that's an impossible amount to absorb. And the pressure didn't stop. They kept calling, kept demanding. The debt kept growing, or so they made him believe, and the threat of criminal charges hung over him like a sword. On December 15th, One day before he died, Rodrigo received several calls. At 5 in the afternoon, he had a 10-minute conversation with a number from La Plata, the capital of Buenos Aires province. Shortly after, he transferred the equivalent of about $200 more. That night, he reported for his shift. He wrote a letter, by hand, addressed to his family and his superiors. In it, he talked about financial trouble. He mentioned corrupt cops who were extorting him. He left it in the pocket of his uniform. And a few hours later at his post, Rodrigo Gomez shot himself with the rifle the Argentine army had given him. When they found the body, the immediate assumption was suicide, but things didn't add up. The letter, the messages on his phone, which had been locked away in a box, the activity in his bank accounts. The federal police's homicide division took the case. Federal Judge Sandra Arroyo Salgado led the investigation, and for over 50 days, they worked. Wiretaps, digital forensics, financial analysis, surveillance. What they found was an entire criminal operation, a gang with clearly defined roles, the ones who lured victims through the app, the ones who played the outraged mother, the ones who posed as cops, the women who collected the money. A smooth, efficient organization running out of a prison, made possible by something that sounds unbelievable but is completely real: the cell phones that inmates in Buenos Aires province prisons were allowed to use. When the government presented the results of the investigation, the chief of staff used a term that stuck: the crime SME. An SME, for those unfamiliar, is what most people would call a small or medium-sized business, and the comparison was spot on, because that's exactly what it was: a business, with structure, a division of roles, a pipeline for finding victims, steady income, and staff specialized in every stage of the con. And the most chilling part, one of the inmates, caught on a wiretap that ended up in the case file, was actually bragging about what he'd built. He said, "Search scammed by Nahuel Conti. I have more than one group with 100, 300 victims. All mine. I put every single one of them there." Rodrigo was just one name on that list, one of hundreds of victims, but he was the one who didn't make it out. The judge on the case made a point worth noting: this isn't new. There's a long history of serious crimes being committed from inside prisons through the use of cell phones. In Argentina, during the pandemic, phones were allowed into prisons through a collective court order, meant to let inmates stay in touch with their families. That measure was never fully reversed, and some people turned it into a business. Rodrigo's father, Juan Carlos Gomez, spoke out publicly. He said this could happen to any family, that what they did to his son was harassment that drove him to his death, and he urged other parents to talk to their kids about the dangers of this kind of scam. 7 people were arrested. 3 ringleaders were transferred to maximum security federal prisons. 4 women who received the money were also taken into custody. But Rodrigo doesn't come back. What happened to him has a name: extortion, and it's growing across Latin America, across the world. It happens on dating apps, on social media, anywhere online where someone can build a fake identity and earn someone's trust. The trap is designed to make the victim feel like there's no way out, to make the shame and fear so overwhelming that they don't ask for help, don't tell anyone, and try to handle it alone. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, or you know someone who is, there is a way out. The first step is telling someone you trust. Don't give in. Don't send money, because once you pay, the pressure doesn't stop. It only gets worse. Rodrigo Gomez was 21 years old. He was a grenadier. He guarded the home of Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, and he died alone at his post because a group of inmates with a cell phone found the perfect way to make him believe he had no other choice. In Argentina, the darkest side of things hides on the internet, and it was exactly there, in that corner most people would rather pretend doesn't exist, where a 12-year-old girl met who she thought was a new friend, a friend who, when they finally met in person, turned out to be something else entirely. Days later, she was found dead, hands tied, in an empty lot. That girl was Michaela Ortega, and this is her story. Michaela was 12 years old. She lived in Bahia Blanca, in the province of Buenos Aires, and she lived the kind of life most girls her age live: school, friends, endless texting. The internet was just part of her daily routine, like it is for pretty much every kid today. She was a normal girl from a humble family with a quiet, uneventful life. No drama, no enemies. No reason whatsoever to suspect that somewhere out there someone had already chosen her as his next victim. Because that's the most disturbing part of all this. It didn't just happen. Someone planned it. Carefully, patiently. With a level of cold-blooded calculation that's genuinely hard to wrap your head around. One day, like any other, Michaela got a friend request on Facebook from a girl named Rocio. She accepted without thinking much of it, and just like that, almost without realizing it, they started talking. At first it was just small talk, the usual getting to know you stuff, but over time it grew into something more. They shared things, told each other secrets, they talked every single day for hours. To Michaela, Rocio was a real friend, someone she genuinely connected with, or at least that's what she believed. What Michaela didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that there was no girl named Rocio on the other side of that screen. There was an adult man, a man who had created that profile with one single purpose in mind, and who had spent weeks, maybe months, building that friendship with one goal, and one goal only. On April 23, 2016, they made plans to meet in person. Rocio suggested they hang out in Bahia Blanca, run some errands, spend the afternoon together. Simple, normal, nothing suspicious about it. Michaela didn't hesitate for a second. Why would she? It was her friend. She knew her. Or at least, she thought she did. That day, she left home without telling anyone where she was going. It wasn't a big deal. She wasn't going far, wasn't doing anything dangerous. It was just an afternoon with a friend, right in the neighborhood. No reason to mention it to her mom. No reason to leave word of where she'd be. It felt like a completely ordinary thing to do. And from that moment on, nobody heard from Michaela again. When night came and her daughter still hadn't shown up, her mother, Monica Sid, started to worry. Michaela wasn't the type to stay out late without checking in. That just wasn't like her. Monica called her friends, asked around the neighborhood, and when she got nothing, she called the police. They started searching, checked the area, went door to door at nearby businesses. Nothing. It was like Michaela had just vanished. With nowhere else to turn, they looked through her social media, and that's where they found the first clue, the chat with Rocio. The conversations, the friendship built over weeks, and the specific plan to meet up that very day close to home. Armed with that, they pulled the security camera footage from the area near a roundabout on Bolivia Street. They went through it carefully, and there she was, Michaela, with her pink bag, walking calmly alongside an adult man. No Rocio anywhere, no girl at all. Just a man she clearly felt comfortable with, because she was walking right next to him, no hesitation, no alarm, like he was someone she trusted. Her mother looked at the footage and didn't recognize him. Nobody did, but there he was, and he was the only lead they had. What they did next was trace the IP address behind Rocio's Facebook profile. Every time someone logs into a social media account, they leave a digital footprint. And that footprint led investigators to a house in Ingeniero White, a small town just south of Bahia Blanca, a few miles from the city center. They went there, they raided the place, and they found Jonathan Luna. He was 26 years old. He had a criminal record. He'd been convicted in 2014 for aggravated robbery, but he'd never actually served that sentence. He'd fled and had been a fugitive ever since, until that moment, because from that day forward, Jonathan Luna wasn't going anywhere. But Michaela was still missing. 35 days had passed since the afternoon she walked out of her house with that pink bag. 35 days with no answers. Her family completely shattered, the entire country watching, and Jonathan, sitting across from investigators, saying he didn't know anything, that he hadn't done anything. Hours of interrogation, a lot of pressure. And then, finally, Jonathan talked. What he confessed that afternoon left everyone in that room speechless. And when it went public, it left the entire country speechless. He said he had created the Rocio profile himself. It wasn't spontaneous, it wasn't random. It was a decision. He had built it specifically to target young girls. He would find profiles of girls, start conversations, and patiently work his way into their trust. Michaela wasn't the first, but she would be the last. He found her on Facebook, started messaging her, and spent weeks doing the work, becoming her friend, learning what she liked, what she responded to, what made her open up. Every single thing was calculated, all of it leading toward one outcome. And when he felt like he had her, when Michaela fully trusted Rocio, he made his move and suggested they meet. That April 23rd, when Michaela showed up at the meeting spot, there was no girl waiting for her. There was Jonathan. He told her he was Rocio's cousin, that plans had changed, and that he'd take her to where Rocio was waiting. Michaela, with all the innocence of a 12-year-old, had no reason to question it. He was her friend's cousin. He was safe. The cameras caught them walking together. Michaela relaxed, completely unsuspecting. Jonathan beside her, slowly steering her away from the area, telling her they were almost there. Meanwhile, he was moving her further and further from anywhere with people, anywhere someone might see them or hear them, until they reached an empty lot on the outskirts of the city. No cameras, no neighbors, no one around, And that's where Jonathan Luna showed the world exactly who he was. He hit her in the head, Michaela dropped to the ground, and he got on top of her. What happened next is hard to talk about, not because there aren't words for it, but because it's almost impossible to accept that something like this could happen to a 12-year-old. But here's what needs to be said. Michaela fought. With everything she had, with every bit of strength in her body, she fought. She screamed. She struggled. She begged for help at the top of her lungs. But they were in the middle of nowhere. Nobody could hear her. And he was a 26-year-old grown man. Jonathan kept telling her to shut up, to stop moving, to stop fighting. Michaela wouldn't listen. She kept screaming, kept struggling, kept resisting, and that, in the mind of someone like him, is what pushed things over the edge. At some point, he snapped. He grabbed Michaela by the throat with both hands and started squeezing. She was still fighting, still trying to break free, but her strength was fading fast. He didn't let go. He kept squeezing and squeezing until Michaela couldn't fight anymore. That 12-year-old girl who had left her house that afternoon with her pink bag to go meet her friend died in that empty lot. When Jonathan realized what he'd done, he didn't panic. He didn't run. He tied Michaela's hands and feet, dragged her body into the brush, and covered it so it couldn't be seen. Then he walked away, just like that. And the only thing he said he regretted, the only thing, wasn't what he had done to that little girl. It was that he hadn't gotten what he came for. Between his confession, the security camera footage, the Facebook records, and the IP trace, the evidence was overwhelming. Jonathan Luna had nowhere to go. He was sentenced to life in prison for aggravated homicide, attempted sexual assault, and grooming. And that last charge matters, because it was the first time in the history of Argentina that grooming resulting in death was ever applied as a criminal charge. A legal milestone that completely changed how the country looked at these kinds of crimes. Michaela's name didn't just stay in the headlines as another victim. It got written into the law. Years after her death, Argentina passed the Ley Mica Ortega, the Mica Ortega Law, which created a national program to prevent grooming and educate kids, parents, and teachers about the dangers of online contact with strangers. An important law, a necessary law, a law that came because of her, but one that came way too late for her. Michaela Ortega was 12 years old. She walked out of her house one afternoon with a pink bag to go meet a friend, and she never came home, because someone on the other side of a screen had already decided she was his perfect victim. And the only thing that could have truly prevented any of this is if that man had never existed at all. If you're already disturbed enough by what you just heard, I hate to tell you, but we still have one more case to go. At what age is a person truly responsible for what they do? When do we stop saying he's just a kid and start saying he's a killer? Most of us never really have to think hard about that question until a case like this one comes along. 3 teenagers, 14, 15, and 16, lured a 15-year-old boy into an abandoned warehouse, tore him, stabbed him 23 times, and walked away laughing. They filmed it, and 2 of the 3 went right back home because the law says they're too young to go to prison. That boy's name was Jeremias Monzon, and this is his story. Jeremias was 15 years old and lived in Santo Tomé, in the province of Santa Fe, Argentina. He lived with his grandparents, in the house where he'd grown up. His mom, Romina, had been planning for him to move in with her that year since he was switching schools. His family describes him as a quiet kid, low-key, no drama with anyone. The kind of guy who minded his own business and never gave anyone a reason to come after him. On December 18th, 2025, around 2:30 in the afternoon, Jeremias grabbed his bike and headed out. He was planning to meet up with someone in the city of Santa Fe. His phone was broken, so he was carrying a spare one with no SIM card, meaning he could only communicate where there was Wi-Fi. It seemed like a small, irrelevant detail at the time. It wasn't. He usually came home around 6. When that hour passed and he hadn't shown up, his family started getting worried. What Jeremias didn't know was that he wasn't heading to some casual meetup that afternoon. He was walking straight into a trap that had been set specifically for him. They reported him missing that same day. The search began, but days went by with no news, until December 22nd, when residents of the Chalet neighborhood in Santa Fe started noticing a nauseating smell coming from a vacant lot nearby. An abandoned warehouse right across from Club Colon's soccer field. Police found a body covered with cardboard, hidden in the brush. It was in an advanced state of decomposition. They brought Jeremias' mother in for the identification. She went, she looked, and she couldn't recognize him. The condition of the body made it impossible to tell with the naked eye. She left still holding on to the hope that it wasn't her son, but shortly after the confirmation came. It was Jeremias. The autopsy was as revealing as it was disturbing. Jeremias had 23 stab wounds spread across his body. Some of them had been made with a screwdriver. He died from hypovolemic shock, basically massive blood loss. He bled out, but that wasn't all. The body was found naked. His killers had stripped off his clothes and dumped them somewhere else to throw investigators off. And as if that wasn't enough, they had placed an improvised makeshift gravestone on top of the body with his name and the date of his death written on it. Everything calculated, everything done with a mocking, almost taunting attitude that's hard to even process. Investigators didn't take long to find the first lead. A security camera had caught Jeremias walking alongside a teenage girl in the city of Santa Fe on the same day he disappeared, December 18th. It was the last image of him alive. He was walking calmly, no signs of distress, like he was with someone he trusted completely. The family recognized the girl. She was 16. Jeremias had mentioned her to his aunt. Exactly how they met isn't entirely clear. Some say they went to the same school, others say they met online. And it was probably a mix of both. What is clear is that Jeremias trusted her. He actually cared about her. She had told him she and her mom were living on the streets, and that worried him. He'd brought it up with his aunt, trying to figure out if there was any way to get them some kind of help. When Jeremias went missing, they reached out to the girl to ask if she knew anything. She said yes, they'd hung out that afternoon, but that afterward, he'd gone somewhere else. They believed her, and not only that, she stayed in contact with the family over the following days, asking if he'd turned up, saying she wanted to help look for him. It was all an act, because the security cameras placed her somewhere else entirely that afternoon, on a route that lined up exactly with the area around the warehouse. And once the video of the murder started circulating, there was no version of events left to hide behind. That video exists. It's part of the case file. What journalists who accessed the court documents have consistently reported is this: Jeremias is seen cornered inside the warehouse. 3 people surround him. They beat him, attack him with knives and a screwdriver, hurling insults the whole time. They ask him about some videos. He says he doesn't have anything. They take his phone and don't find what they're looking for, but that doesn't stop them. The brutality keeps going and going, and the whole time in the background you can hear laughter. What's been said on social media, though none of it has been officially confirmed, is that the motive may have been an explicit video involving the girl, possibly with one or both of the other 2, that Jeremias supposedly had shared. Again, that's unconfirmed. Officially, the motive is still part of the investigation, but whatever the reason was, nothing justifies what they did to him. The 16-year-old girl was the one running the whole thing. According to prosecutors, she acted as the bait. She used Jeremias' trust to lure him in under false pretenses and bring him straight to where the other 2 were already waiting. Inside the warehouse, she was the one calling the shots, telling them to hold him down, telling them not to let him get away, pushing them to get the passcode to his phone. She orchestrated the ambush from start to finish. The other 2 were 14 and 15 years old. When it was over, all 3 of them left. A security camera caught them meeting up roughly an hour and a half after the murder. And that footage introduced another character, Nadia, 41 years old, the mother of the 16-year-old girl. What was a grown woman doing meeting up with 3 teenagers an hour and a half after they had just killed someone? Investigators asked that exact question. And the answer they found was pretty damning. There are indications that Nadia knew in advance what was being planned, and that she had promised to help them afterward. What they reportedly did together at that post-murder meetup was get rid of compromising evidence and try to get their story straight before talking to police. On January 29, 2026, Nadia was formally charged as a necessary participant in the homicide. But honestly, the legal outcome of all this is what made people the most furious. The 16-year-old girl was charged with aggravated homicide, triply aggravated to be specific: premeditation, treachery, cruelty, and the involvement of more than one person. If she were an adult, she'd be looking at life in prison. But because of her age, she'll be tried under the juvenile justice system. For now, she's being held in a youth detention facility in Rosario. The other 2, the 14-year-old and the 15-year-old, were both identified as participants in the murder. They were briefly detained for the initial hearings, and then they were released. They went home, because in Argentina, anyone under the age of 16 cannot be held criminally responsible. It doesn't matter what they did. They cannot be tried as criminals or sentenced to prison, regardless of how serious the crime is. The most the system can do is apply guardianship measures, offer psychological support, place them in a youth facility, or simply return them to their families. But an actual criminal conviction? Not possible. Argentina, along with Cuba, has the highest age of criminal responsibility in all of Latin America. Jeremias' mother put it plainly, being 14 doesn't make them innocent. They're 14-year-old killers. And it's pretty hard not to understand exactly where she's coming from. One of the boys, the one whose profile picture is a photo of a serial killer known as the Angel of Death, posted on social media saying people need to stop normalizing feeling sorry for people they don't even know, and that he's just waiting for things to die down so he can get back to his normal life. And the worst part isn't even that. The worst part is how many people, mostly girls, replied to that post, showing their support. Jeremias' case cracked open a debate that Argentina has been putting off for a long time. At what point can a person actually be held responsible for what they do? At 16? At 14? Does it depend on the crime? Those who argue for lowering the age of criminal responsibility say that assuming a 14-year-old doesn't understand what it means to kill someone is an insult to everyone's intelligence. That all three of them knew exactly what they were doing because they planned it, because they carried it out with coordination, and because they tried to cover it up afterward. Those on the other side argue that lowering the age of criminal responsibility doesn't actually reduce crime, and that without real investment in prevention, education, and social support, all it ends up doing is criminalizing poverty. That throwing more teenagers in prison isn't the answer. The problem with this debate is that it always shows up too late. It surfaces after the tragedy, when the family is already destroyed and the community is already outraged. And in that environment, having a calm, level-headed conversation about policy is nearly impossible. The aunt of one of the boys spoke out publicly. She called her own nephew a monster and a killer. She said it was his own mother who made the decision to turn him in to the police, with all the evidence, no cover-up, that their entire family stands with Jeremias. But she also said she lives with the fear of knowing her nephew is out there free, showing zero remorse, and that without a real sentence, there's no guarantee he won't hurt someone again. Jeremias' family turned their grief into something concrete. They're pushing for what they're calling the Jeremias Law, a reform that would lower the age of criminal responsibility and change the consequences for minors who commit homicide. The governor of Santa Fe also weighed in. Someone who commits a crime like this knows what they're doing, and the punishment has to match the crime, not the age of the person who committed it. At Jeremias' school, the front door filled up with flowers, letters, and photos. His friends received psychological support. His mom, Romina, keeps speaking out, keeps pushing, keeps showing up, because at this point, it's the only thing she feels she can still do for him. Jeremias Monzon was 15 years old. He rode his bike out one December afternoon to meet up with someone he trusted. What he found instead was an abandoned warehouse, 3 people who had been waiting for him, and no way out. The trial is still ongoing. 2 of his killers are free. And the question this case opened up still doesn't have a clear answer. At what age is a person truly responsible for what they do? Thanks for watching all the way through. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this debate down in the comments. And let me know which country you'd like me to cover next. See you guys.